Today, I'm going to share a heartwarming story about how a small act of kindness can make a big difference in someone's life. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, and enjoy this story of the unexpected kindness. It was a typical Wednesday morning in the bustling city of Greenfield. The sun was just starting to rise, casting a warm, golden hue over the streets. Sarah, a young woman in her late 20s, hurried out of her small apartment. With a quick glance at her watch, she realized she was running late for work again. Her mind was cluttered with thoughts of deadlines, meetings, and the endless to-do list that awaited her at the office. As Sarah dashed towards the subway station, she suddenly noticed an elderly woman standing on the corner, looking lost and confused. Her name was Mrs. Thompson, a sweet lady in her early 80s who lived just a few blocks away from Sarah. Mrs. Thompson was well known in the neighborhood for her love of gardening and her warm smile that could brighten anyone's day. Sarah hesitated for a moment. She was already running late, and stopping to help would make her even later. But something inside her wouldn't let her walk away. She took a deep breath and approached Mrs. Thompson. "Excuse me, Mrs. Thompson, are you okay?" Mrs. Thompson looked up at Sarah with relief in her eyes. "Oh, Sarah dear, I'm so glad you're here," she said. "I was on my way to the grocery store, but I've forgotten the way. Everything looks so different these days." Sarah smiled reassuringly and offered to walk Mrs. Thompson to the store. As they walked, Mrs. Thompson began to talk about her late husband, Mr. Thompson, who had passed away the previous year. She shared stories of their life together, how they used to go to the same grocery store every Sunday morning, and how much she missed those simple moments. Sarah listened intently, her heart aching for the elderly woman. She had always seen Mrs. Thompson as a strong, independent lady, but now she realized how lonely she must be. When they finally reached the grocery store, Mrs. Thompson turned to Sarah with a tearful smile. "Thank you, Sarah. You have no idea how much this means to me," she said. "I don't know what I would have done without you today." Sarah felt a lump in her throat as she hugged Mrs. Thompson. "It was no trouble at all, Mrs. Thompson. Anytime you need help, just let me know." As Sarah watched Mrs. Thompson walk into the store, she realized that she had spent nearly an hour helping the elderly woman. She was definitely going to be late for work. But as she walked towards the subway station, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace and satisfaction. Helping Mrs. Thompson had made her realize that sometimes the most important things in life aren't the tasks and deadlines we worry about, but the connections we make with others. Sarah arrived at work much later than usual, but she didn't mind. The rest of the day felt lighter, more manageable, as if that small act of kindness had lifted a weight off her shoulders. And from that day on, she made it a point to check in on Mrs. Thompson regularly, sometimes just to chat, other times to help her with groceries or take her to the park. It wasn't a huge sacrifice, but to Mrs. Thompson it meant the world. And so, a simple act of kindness turned into a beautiful friendship. Sarah learned that while we often rush through our busy lives, taking a moment to help someone in need can make all the difference, not just for them, but for us as well.